Hello, and welcome to If Blank Were a Tabletop RPG. Now, to get rid of a confusion of last time that we recorded this, there might have been a small confusion. This is not if this was a tabletop RPG system. We're going to be diving into if the stories were as if the stories were actually tabletop players playing as those characters, and it just so happened to fit into that type of story. Almost like as if we're explaining as if the story were a tabletop RPG, not as if they were actually the story. I probably overly complicated that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It's,
Either way, it's within the narrative of if I was retelling the specific stories as if they were a game that I had narrated or I'd played in or I'd just heard about. Or I guess since Kane, you are also here with me today.
Yeah, I've appeared like twice.
in this video format that we said that both of us would be doing, so
Or in like one other video. I'm like the fill-in guest when you don't have anyone else to come and get. It's like, I'll just get him, I guess.
Well, you're mostly right, but these are our videos. This one, so this will just be you and me. If we find anyone else who is interested enough to sort of like listen to the two of us babble and add some things to it, to I don't know, a show that we both very much enjoy.
That would be a miracle.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, so we're just going to move on. So, the topic today is going to be My Hero Academia. Two reasons. Because, A, we're going to be mostly framing it in the format of if it were a tabletop RPG game that was I don't know, narrated, GM'd, played, or a campaign that was as if My Hero Academia was the campaign that they were playing using the system of AnimiteTales. Which shouldn't be any shocker or surprise. Either AnimiteTales or Mutants and Masterminds. I don't know too much about Mutants and Masterminds, but I know some amount.
Yeah, I can't say I know anything. So,
I mean, if anyone's wondering why aren't we talking about D&D for this, it's because that almost
it's too obvious. Come on, guys.
Well, that and also almost any and all of the different tabletop aspects are way too difficult to specifically comprise it. Like, yeah, I guess you could say, like, oh, these characters are this, that, and other. I guess you could argue that Deku is a warlock, but with very different powers.
It doesn't really work. In that world, it doesn't really work in the way that powers are set. Like,
you'd have to do heavy homebrew, and at that point, you might
because the powers are too singled out in terms of their abilities. Because a lot of classes in D&D obviously get a widespread of abilities and spells and such things, but obviously having the power of either like super strength or I can very specifically just make explosions.
Yes.
In terms of that power set, it's way too specific for what D&D offers, because D&D gives you a class that then has a multitude of abilities that you can pull off, especially spellcasters. So
no, absolutely. So that's why we're talking about it using systems like AnimiteTales. It won't necessarily be direct because not everyone knows about it. But it's also because that then if you know at home, you know about any other tabletop RPGs, you can sort of envision it similar to that aspect.
Should we just give a quick description of My Hero before we start?
Yes. So, do you want to take it away, or do you want me to?
I'll do the best I can, and you can fill in the gaps. So, essentially, My Hero is in the world. It's mostly focused on in Japan. About essentially a world where suddenly people got powers. These powers are sort of biological, I guess. You're naturally born with them, either inherited from parents or just random mutations. It can vary from you being a shark man to, as I stated earlier, being able to generate explosions. And the story it starts with Izuku, or Midoriya, who is born into this world with no powers. And he really wants to be a hero. and he looks up to the number one hero of Japan, All Might, who essentially is the greatest hero in the world at this point. There isn't really anyone stronger than him, and he's essentially your idol when it comes to what a true hero is. And over courses of actions, and he meets All Might, and at first he's told that without a quirk it's essentially impossible to be a hero, but after seeing his or I guess you could say having like a true heart of a hero, going out of his way to save people, even if it would end up killing him, he takes him as a mentor, and he gains the same quirk as the number one hero, one for all.
So, for those who don't know anything about the series, it is an anime or a Japanese animated show. There are both, at minimum, there are both Japanese and English dubs, and there's 5 seasons so far. We will not be talking about anything in the manga, although we might have a discussion about that in another video. I say this purely because that there might be those who would prefer to watch us break down the anime so far rather than break down anything else. So we'll do that, and then if there's a manga version or manga version...
Also, save spoiler warnings.
Yeah, so it's safe
to
say
heads
there will
up,
be...
go and watch the show, because if you haven't, you will be spoiled now.
On the bright side, you can watch them on Funimation, Crunchyroll, or the first season is on Netflix for some reason. We will not be talking about the movies purely because the movies suck. Also because that I just am a bit of a.
They are canon though, so
they're not.
They are though. Thing. Actually, if I'll speak to you this off thing, but they are actually canon. They're in the manga. They actually show that it is actually canon, and I'll tell you why. But
the second one isn't though. Because it's not.
Two Heroes is.
Well, what you mean? The first one or the second one?
I think it's the first one, the one where they go to America.
The first one where they go to America. I've heard that's canon. I don't know if that's true.
And I'm pretty sure all the movies are considered canon. Again, we'll speak about this later.
I'm not sure because of the way that the way that the second one ends. They've gone past where that meets.
Again, leave that for another time.
Anyway,
I was going to suggest if we're going to start with an arc, especially how our system works. I think the tournament arc would probably be a good place to actually start, considering how that works.
That's a good thing, but I am actually going to go further back. I'm actually going to say we'll start with the first couple of episodes, because you brought it up, and I think that it's important to actually say this. In the tabletop RPG, let's say, for instance, okay, we'll say that there's about 5 to 6 players in this tabletop RPG. The beginning of the story, where you have Midoriya, Izuku Midoriya, saying, I was born without a quirk and I don't have a power, blah blah blah, and then suddenly being given the power by All Might because that he attempted to do something that was relatively almost self-sacrificial. He tried to save his friend regardless. I would say that is all their backstory. That is not actually playable story. I think the first moment that it is playable story, arguably, is the... You know what I'm going to say? It's arguably the entrance exam.
Yeah.
So, we've got backstory being given, the Hero Society, All Might's the number one hero, only Midoriya, so that player would know that All Might has a great weakness, how his quirk works, and that he has given him his quirk because that he is shown to be a hero at heart, regardless of if he had a quirk or not. So only Midoriya, aka that player, knows. Then you've got the other playered characters, and I'm gonna take a guess, and I'm gonna say that this is the player list of the main characters. Bakugo.
Yep.
Midoriya. Obviously Midoriya and Bakugo. I'm going to say Ochako Uraraka, or Ochako Uraraka.
Yeah.
Tenya Ida.
Yep.
And then finally I'm going to say Kirishima. Now,
at least in that part, that's
in that part. Now, there is an argument for, and I'm going to say this now, there is an argument that there was 6 of them, but due to a couple of constraints, of that tabletop RPG session, one of the players had to keep dropping in and out, and that one is Shoto Todoroki.
Well, he isn't in the entrance exam.
He's not, no, and that's why he comes in every now and again and then comes out every now and again, because he makes it he's shown off in the combat exam, or well, the combat practice.
Yeah.
After the entrance exam, because obviously he gets in via recommendation, so we don't really see anything to do with that. But then after that, he then shows up and then helps All Might during the USJ situation, and then they sort of use him a lot in season 2. So I would say that if it was a tabletop RPG,
he's more like a late player to join.
Yeah, he's a late player that joins. Yeah, he joins late. So anyway, so we've got that. So the first arc is pretty simplistic. You've got the characters that do and don't mix well, and so on and so forth. You've just got the other characters, and therefore the big interesting points is that the narrator splits everyone up on purpose so that they can feel like they can get to know the large cast of NPCs. For instance, Suyu, Asui, and Mineta, because that Midoriya is the only one who can save them in that regard, because he breaks his fingers. Now, again, we'll go to that in a second. The beginning part, where he breaks his legs and breaks his arm to destroy the 0 pointer, and he gets a load of rescue points. I'm going to say this: either in that framework, either the player, either the GM or DM or narrator knew that they were going to give rescue points as well as combat points, or they switched it around at the end just so that they could get back at the.
I feel like it's partly the last minute. Oh, we should probably do something.
Yes. What kind of hero course would idly sit by and not judge them based on rescuing?
It's that final moment where it's like, okay, this was more meant to be something that you run away from if you encounter it. Like the big scary villain, and it's like, oh, okay, he can probably destroy it, but he's not going to get anything out of it, so there's no point. And then I imagine through a couple of bad rolls, Araka's like they're at the table and they roll bad, and then they get trapped, and he's like, oh no. And then obviously, and then they get saved, and he's like, well, he didn't destroy anything else, but he did save a character, so it makes sense that in this hero course that behind the scenes they all gave him points, and he got a bunch of hero points because of his actions.
Yes.
So I kind of imagine it like that, where it was just more a bit of luck how the situation went through bad rolls and good rolls.
Yeah, so if the DM was if this was set out in a DM, and it was, we're saying that like instead of it being written by an actual writer, and it was actually done as a campaign by a DM. In this scenario, yeah, it would. Okay, so you're saying that it would seem like that. I'm going to agree with you then, because I think, although that it does seem like, ooh, I could plan this out, it does seem like, actually, yeah, it makes sense. I'd give them points like this, right, at the very last second, because it's like, holy shit, you actually destroyed the 0 pointer. I was just doing reverse psychology and hope that you would run away from it, because it's like bigger than the buildings. And so, yeah, going through that, and obviously having it that the character has an insane amount of damage. Because I'm going to say this, it's kind of like with either body augmentation or, again, like some kind of homebrew.
I mean, it's exactly how body augmentation works, because if you fail the con roll, then your body does get destroyed by using it.
Yes, although it's like a unique attribute where it just like powers up so ridiculously that it's like...
Well, I think you can break your limbs if you use it.
It's only if your con roll is like natural ones, but in this particular one, you could actually have it that the con roll has to basically be less than one roll requirement or one increment less. So it's like, oh, the requirement's 15, and you don't even, you don't
like the
even
power
get
output is
10.
Greater, but the risk to the body is
the power output is ridiculous. So it's like, oh yeah, do 5d10s worth of damage when you hit this robot, which instantly destroys it because the amount of super strength he has is like plus 10, and because he's using 100% just in one punch, does plus 10. Therefore, like again in AnimiteTales, the multiplier to durability is different, because you have damage to health and damage to durability, and super strength multiplies by 2 times for every +1.
I mean, it'd be more like 2d10s worth of. I think if I'm doing math correctly, from a d4 because obviously it starts at d4 and
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. It would be 2d12s in total.
2d12s,
but
yeah.
the reason why is because obviously since it's been passed on to so many people, it's now like the modifier is maxed out, but the damage continues. So it's like it is 5d10s.
I don't know because it's the 9th user, so
I don't know. That's a good point. I mean, obviously, the way that we have it with 0 techniques, it ends up at 5d10s. That's the maximum if you keep pushing it. Having it that is the 9th user, even if they don't get all the way to the maximum of that power usage, or even if they don't buff it any more than a few dice up, I still reckon that it would eventually get to it.
Because also they... Okay, I can't state that because that's manga stuff, damn it. But they do explain through the process that it was only really one individual user that trained up the power a bunch. And then it was because after that, that's why the power actually ended up getting so strong to the point where when it was passed to All Might, it was actually a really powerful quirk.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they also state that the longer that you have it, the more powerful it becomes. And All Might has had it for about 30 or 35 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine this would still be like. I don't think it would be near. Like, I still think it would be very powerful. I just don't think it would be near 5d10's worth of output.
I'll tell you what, we'll agree to disagree on this particular thing.
Yeah.
I don't think the exact amount is massively necessary to the system, but
it's a large amount of damage.
We'll say that it is a large amount of damage that basically can shatter apart things really easily. Like, oh my gosh, like if you use this against your fellow classmates, they will instantly die. If you use this against this robot, it will instantly die. If you use it against these villains, they will instantly become paste. And so therefore he has to start learning how to control it.
Which also makes things kind of interesting character-wise as well, because obviously the person who's playing as Bakugo probably went in there assuming they've got the most, well, at least their character did, assuming they've probably got the most powerful power there.
Oh yeah, the ability to generate explosion. Hell, it could be the fact that I go, okay, everyone has to have, like, say for instance I was the narrator and I go, okay, everyone has to have a level 10 power, or everyone has this, that, or the other, or whatever. And let's say for instance, I don't know, everyone gets different abilities. Okay, I've actually now got it. I've now realised what it could be. Everyone starts off with a small amount of levels. Let's say I've given them 7 levels. So technically, if they put all of their levels into their powers, they still wouldn't be at maximum level. But then one of the players then uses what we have known as power discoveries, which are special abilities that superhumans and anomalies can have, and say like, oh, I discovered my powers through this. Now, the way that you could have it is Bakugo has his of experimentation. He sort of figured out all of these different weird ways that he could use his abilities, because by the time that he gets to like the entrance, he not only knows how to use them to deal a lot of damage to people and make massive explosions, he also uses it to fly, because as he says, I've known how to fly with my power since day one. So, or at least day one at school. So therefore, I would say that that's how they argue that that's how the player would have argued that it's like, oh yeah, I've been experimenting with it ever since. So it's not necessarily I've been experimented on. I've been experimenting using my power throughout a large amount of time, like using it to burn things, using it to destroy things, using it to propel myself, and so on and so forth. And with the way that works, he then just goes, yeah, so you've given me 7, and I start with 4 trade levels, right? Yeah. Okay, 1 on SPMA, 10 on my powers, I have explosion emission instead of making objects explosive. And then instantly, as you say, they start the game believing that they're going to be the most powerful character, and it's like, oh my gosh, how do we deal with this? And then suddenly it's like, man, this guy's so OP, it's just not even funny, or it's just not even fair. And then obviously you then have Midoriya, who has a power that is, again, unique, homebrew, unique attribute or something, where it is like maxed out ridiculous, but there's so many downsides to it that it's like practically like, oh, if the user uses it, then they break it. So each time that they get to a certain level, it's then that thing of like, okay, this level you get a little bit more power, you get a little bit more power, and then later on they go, okay, so until you get to this level, I'm gonna say the more pluses that you give yourself in the terms of super stats from your body augmentation, each time that you do it, I'm gonna say that you have this many downsides, but for every level that you go up, you can have this many. So by the time that they get to level 3, where they can have full cowling, aka head to toe in this game, because you can augment your entire body by level 3, instead of giving you plus 10, you're going to be stuck with plus 3. Which, yeah, technically the percentages don't work out that way, considering the difference in the show is 5% versus 100%, and 3 out of 10 is not... I mean, hell, 1 out of 10 is not even 5%, but you still get roughly what I'm meaning. I mean, someone could have also figured out the exact amount of damage as well if they really wanted to be finicky about it, but yeah. But then you've got, I guess, Ida. You could state that they have a unique attribute of Speedster.
Yeah.
Where it's like engines from their legs, but because of that, they also get like maybe some like augmentation to the damages of their kicks.
And even they then have to worry about overheating if they use certain things. So.
Also having it that like that Recipro burst is actually a pure technique. They could also state that, I don't need to run, I just need to either be on a slippery enough surface or on roller skates, and my legs just propel me from the sheer force alone thanks to Recipro or thanks to enough engine exhaust. I'd say funnily enough, Ochako again potentially could either be
that's definitely a unique attribute ability, to be fair.
It would either be telekinesis, or it would be flight, but the user generates it on someone else. So it's like...
The only reason I think telekinesis makes more sense is because she doesn't have... The only control she has is turning them anti-gravity.
You know what, I'll agree with you, but then we have it that, like, it's only anti-gravity, she can't manipulate the objects any further than the fact that they're no longer affected by the gravitational pull, or magnetism, or whatever. You could then have it that, like, it's infinite range from when she can then release it, and then it starts plummeting down.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's how a power works.
And obviously her ability relies her to have tactile contact with the object, at least her fingertips, to be actually able to activate them.
At that point, you could also state that because of that, she actually has to have, maybe it's that thing of, she actually has to have that ability of, by the way, when you get to level 10, you cannot take anything other than gravity manipulation.
Yeah, I assume so, yeah.
Because that's like the downside. It's like you also, like, because of the way that your unique attribute works, you can't make cones of it. Or you could say, you have to take thorough job because you have the ability to, instead of touching an object, that entire object is lighter. You can also specifically choose, like, I'll touch my shoes. My entire body doesn't become lighter. My shoes do. Or you can even go, I'll make all of your objects and items and equipment lighter, but I won't make your body lighter. So that then you're able to do that, because it has to be tactile contact with their skin for their entire body to become lighter. So again, maybe having it that it has to be thorough job instead, because it is specific pinpoint factors of a person / object. And then finally, Kirishima / Todoroki. Todoroki, again, you could either have it that he's just
I think we should talk about Kirishima, because we can... Well, actually, no, I would think that Todoroki is actually a Gemini anomaly of pyrokinetic, which, for state those, it's essentially when you have the same house stacked on top of each other.
I'll disagree with you in a second.
The only reason is because I think it would be new gen then to make it cryokinesis, because he and it's very specific because he can only regenerate obviously ice on one side and fire on the other.
Okay.
And there are no transformational states for it. It's literally just generation and manipulation.
Okay, no, that is a good point, actually. Okay.
So I would say it's more that, and I think it also makes more sense for the character design as well. Because the character design is literally split in half, red and blue eyes on one side, grey and white hair on the other, which is it's essentially, it just works on the design part as well of Gemini anomaly.
Okay then. In that case, then, so with the Gemini anomaly thing, I'm actually going to say this. I'm going to say that it is Gemini anomaly, but it's the new gen Gemini anomaly, but they take both of the mutations, which are temperature control, where the user can amplify even more coldness or amplify even more heat, but specifically from them / whatever they're touching. Because
obviously that wouldn't be until very, very late.
Because they do not have any capability of manipulating fire or ice once it leaves their body. Because he has to touch the ice and melt it, and once the fire is done, he has to then use his ice to cool and get rid of the fire. So it's more like generation and control whilst it's still attached to him. Whereas the ability known as Flame Dominion or Elemental Dominion allows the users to not only manipulate it perfectly outside of their body, but also become immune, which, spoiler alert, in Season 2, you find out that he's not immune to either.
Stated that, the state that it's resisted, not
He's resistant to his cold for a certain amount of time, but eventually he gets.
Also, I would argue as well that his ice power is technically is a higher level than his firepower is.
Definitely.
Because obviously it stated that for a long time he rejects using his fire ability and only the ice one. So more than likely his ice ability would be like at 3 or 4 maybe, and then his fire would be maybe like at 2 at most, because he has some ability to actually activate it at will.
So again, another unique attribute, but again, you're saying a new generation on one of the 2 powers that is a Gemini anomaly that allows him to get, instead of both of the different abilities, he gets, those 2 abilities. Now, theoretically,
and they are technically counted as separate abilities.
Yeah, two separate powers, but they operate exactly identically. Now, obviously, you could say that, or obviously you could say, if someone's like, no, you can't have them both be mutations or evolution or whatever. Technically, you could also say, oh, it's Flame Dominion or whatever, but it's just like the downside to the specific new generation. Or we keep saying this. New generation just basically means that they have a power, but the flavor of the damage is different. For instance, instead of pyrokinesis, they generate, I don't know, blue flames that do energy or ice damage or something. Or a person with the ability of decay, and instead of actually rotting them, it's chocolification, so it actually starts turning their body into chocolate rather than decaying their body. It's basically, all it mostly affects is it takes away one damage type and pops another one in. This, in the game, is known as a unique attribute, a function that alters the power or alters a specific factor of a person's abilities. If you were to play, let's say, for instance, if you were to play even a human, you could have a unique attribute where your character cannot breathe the air, but can breathe underwater, and therefore they have gills. So therefore you have one downside that is equal to the upside. Damage rarity does not count towards any more or any less upsides or downsides. For instance, if you say you have a weakness to darkness, if darkness is a confirmed damage type in your narrator's universe, it does not matter how rare or how common it is, that should be fine. If it does not exist at all, your narrator can say no, because in the rules of the game, you are supposed to have a weakness at some point. But the weakness should not be necessarily something that is non-existent, therefore you are immune to everything. But with the unique attribute system here, as Kane was just saying, having it that they are a Gemini anomaly, which basically means that they have 2 powers that are identical, but then having it that the only difference between the 2 powers is the element. Therefore, they are technically the same mechanically, but because their abilities are affecting different things, one is for ice and cold, and the other one is for fire and heat, because of those 2 abilities are relatively different, but they're using the same mechanical leveling trees, they basically do sort of count as a Gemini anomaly. That's interesting. I actually agree with you there on that one. Yeah, so Todoroki obviously being a Gemini anomaly, again, another character that is actually like straight away really powerful. Either having it that they are early level ridiculously good, but not
like I said, I
balance.
imagine their ice power at most would be like 5. right? Because the amount of ice they can generate is ridiculous.
Oh,
But then I imagine their fire would only be at like level 2 because it's like they've learned how to they can generate it at will, but they haven't practiced with it at all, apart from like a technique that even then is combined with their ice ability. So it's that thing of like he hasn't really made any real progress with his fire at that point in time. It's just the ability to generate a decent amount of flame. So
exactly, yeah. And finally, we'll get into Kirishima. Thermal armor. There we go.
yeah.
I think the only thing that I could say is the only thing that he probably has going for him is purely buffs. He probably is a character that starts off at level 3 and then just has mostly hand-to-hand based style of effects. Maybe a couple of SPMAs that further augment.
I mean, at that point,
damage.
I would say at the beginning, I would say he probably doesn't have any. I would say the only characters that have SPMA are Todoroki, because he has some techniques. Bakugo, because he's...
I'd say Bakugo has one, which is the flight usage style. I'd say Todoroki obviously has a couple because it's Todoroki. And I don't think... I think Kirishima
Ida
would
might,
have...
because you could argue that the retro burst is a technique because it amplifies his speed for a short period of time and then immediately has a downside.
Yeah, you mean
and it is a family
burst.
thing.
I'd say, you know what? I'd say, Reciprocal Burst would probably either be a pure technique or a strenuous form. I
think strenuous form makes sense, especially from how it's been described in work. Or a pure. It might be. It depends how you do it. 'Cause it's a short burst of speed.
I'd actually argue that it's a pure technique, but its downside is instantaneous drawbacks. It's not a roll requirement. It's not I can mediate these things. I can get rid of it. No. Okay, guys, it's a really easy move for me to use, but it basically practically puts me outside of the capabilities of being able to fight. Like, I become ridiculously fast for about maybe a whole turn or a whole rotation, and that is it. You have me for about 10 to 30 seconds, and then done. Yeah. And then you've then got when he gets it later, like Recipro Turbo, which is apparently up to 10 minutes. It's more just like it's a strenuous form. Oh yeah. And again, he's really ridiculously good at doing that. But again, we'll get to that. But I'd say you're right about that. Those three are probably the only ones that have them, except from I'd say Kirishima has one, which is a core improvement, which further augments his hand-to-hand damage. Now, I'd say that we've sort of covered that aspect of like their mechanical factors. Even Midoriya's, as we said, like body augmentation. He just has ridiculously high super strength, but the downside is every time he does it, he has to roll. Every time he fails, he basically shatters his arms. Because it's at the beginning of the game, he's always breaking his arms and legs and fingers. But I'd say before moving on from the first arc, I'd say that he figures out pretty quickly that he could be sneaky and go, okay, I'm going to throw, and at the exact last minute of the throw, I just sacrifice a finger to launch it off at the exact last minute, because it's like someone's like, I know how you should be throwing at the key moment of putting all your power and flexibility into the last, even into the last finger to just push it that extra amount. And so because of that, that's how they do it. And it's like, I only broke one finger, so I can continue.
They do generally figure out, because obviously if you remember, he is just going to throw it and sacrifice his armor first to throw the whole ball.
Well, that's exactly it. I think that's the narrator stepping in and going, whoa, now, you got to be careful. If you break your entire arm, you're basically done. And it's like, okay. And the player's just thinking for a second. It's like, I've got it. Okay, I think I've got an idea. And then just yeets it and just goes, I'm going to roll still to use it. And the narrator's going, okay, yeah, sure, what you got? Out of only my finger. Okay, go ahead, and just got either a natural 20 or just such a really high roll. It was like, this kid.
I mean, another way you could do it is it's technically power and sleight of hand, because it's like to activate the power, but then it's also to activate it at the really specific moment that you need it.
Bit of finesse,
hand movement.
Yeah. No, I think I quite like that. But I think that and then the flick, those are the only two times, because it's like, okay, so you're saying that because obviously All Might's so powerful, when he moves his body, he basically he can generate massive powers of air force. So if I do a flick at 100% of his power and shatter my finger and thumb, can I do it where I create a whirlpool? And the DM's just like, okay, if you can do it, and then gets the roll, shatters fingers, creates whirlpool, and then the narrator's like, oh, okay, yeah. The NPC starts throwing a bunch of his sticky balls into the whirlpool, and the other NPC jumps off of the boat, holding both of you in as you now pass as she goes. We've now passed the shipwreck zone, and then basically the League of Villains happens. The main kid is like, oh, I need to fight this guy, and then basically it's like, All Might arrives. I am here, and then here's the question: do you think that the League of Villains thing was too much, or do you think that it was all staged for the sake of showing the players what they're up against in the future?
I think it was a bit of both. I think it was to get some actual combat in, because that entire bit from the beginning is described as basically just you going over how to rescue people. But then also it gets interrupted by the League of Visions, and a bunch of the characters get transported to different spots. I think each of the players basically get separated and are given an NPC except Bakugo and Kirishima, which are teleported together.
Because they're teleported together because they're the ones that actually go, no, we're going to fight together, and that's why they get sent off, because it's like, okay, no, you
so you could just have it that, and then obviously Todoroki immediately just insta-wins his fight. Because ice is broken.
Because Todoroki.
Yeah, he literally just steps and freezes them all. And then he's like, right, tell me who sent you. As he's threatening to completely freeze a man.
Yeah. Who starts crying because the intimidation roll sets.
And then Midoriya gets transported with two NPCs, which then he comes up with a plan of how they're going to get out of this situation. Which then obviously succeeds. And then obviously Bakugo and Kirishima just beat up everyone that again tries to fight them. And then, because I think Uraraka and that lot are still near the front door or something like that. I don't exactly remember where they are. But and Ida, obviously he managed to actually escape the portal thing before he got dragged in, so he's actually running off to go and get All Might.
Yeah.
He's actually probably not. He's probably not playing for a while because obviously he's running for quite a long time
I think that's just more because the narrator split everyone up and was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to be one of those DMs who doesn't have to worry. But then suddenly he just goes, but now that I've split everyone up, I now have to do different parts of each of their stories so that they can do it. Okay, Bakugo and Kirishima, I'm just going to give you a couple of quite a few enemies to fight. And then it's that thing of I don't know, let's say for instance the guy who's playing as Bakugo has ridiculously high dexterity and strength, and suddenly that guy who's the chameleon just jumps over and is like, I've got you, and he just grabs him and explodes his head instantly. I think that was that thing of alright, yeah, roll disadvantage, and still gets both of his rolls get above that guy's attack roll. So it's just he just immediately grabs his head and then explodes from his hand and then just knocks the guy out instantly. And it's like, okay, that reaction time was insane. And therefore, having that moment, I think you're right, though. I think the Ida thing would have been okay, look, you have the ability to run, you need to get going and hurry up because the heroes are not doing well against this onslaught.
Yeah, and he only just gets away with a clutch roll in the door, because obviously he almost gets sucked into the portal, but he just makes it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. As for the
and I imagine Todoroki, the DM was either maybe I've given them a bit too many enemies, and then he just insta-wins, or he's like, nah, he's got this. I know his character.
No, I allowed him to build this one because I like the idea of him being a ridiculously OP character.
It's also the thing, because the DM in that case would have, maybe he random rolled the NPC, and he was just like, oh no, this could be bad, because he got Invisible. At that point, he has basically no combat power of proficiencies. It's like, oh no, this could be bad, and it just, again, insta wins his thing. It's like, oh wait, Never mind.
Never mind.
It's that character.
as for the rest of it, I think it went pretty well. I'd say that I'd argue that like the Nomu, it could have been built with like as a husk, but with like a bundle of different unique attributes, or even just having
Which you should probably describe what a husk is.
A husk?
Everyone who
Well,
hasn't played us this.
in AnimiteTales, a husk is a being that has about 3 different powers, but they're all biological effect powers. They don't have any. They don't have any abilities that allow them to control outside factors. They can only affect their own personal bodies, such as regeneration, durability, super strength, breathing fire. Even having it where they can affect their own intelligence, wisdom, visibility, charisma.
They're also not human and don't exactly look very human either.
As a matter of fact, I'll see if I can, in fact, show you one of the scenes that I still have from the villain campaign. If I go on here, I'm now changing the screen so that people might be able to see it.
Yeah.
There we go. If I just click on that. And then get rid of all of them that aren't husks. Oh, no. Go on, get.
But yeah, so
here,
sorry,
I've got them. So here's 3 different husks. They are known as Archlings, Shadows, or Berserkers. There are also Stalkers as well, but I don't actually have a picture of them. So I did have a picture of Donkey who actually was a Berserker, but for now we'll just show these 3. They can have any type of physical mutation of either like basically a prehensile tongue, an extra set of arms, wings, a tail, horns, fangs, or claws. So they can have any type of different things. There are certain ones that have red skin, certain ones have orange skin, some of them have dark blue, navy, like pitch black. Some of them can have human. Certain can have like real world human, different colors of different types of shades of skin as well. But some of them can look anywhere as normal as ordinary humans of the different real world races, or they can actually look as monstrous as actual monsters, demons, and like mutants, because they are heavily mutated humans that have now become a different type of race, that they no longer are human. So that's sort of what we've got there. Those are the more humanistic ones, but we do humanoid ones, but we do actually have a couple of people who have just like started playing as pure monsters. But basically that's what I assume that they would be playing as they would have built as like.
They're at least designed after the same system as the husks in terms of
they have multiple abilities, and oh no, that's a shocker sort of thing, because we don't have anyone who has any multiple abilities. And I think it would either be that like they like if they were playing this in AnimiteTales, it's almost like as if the narrator in this particular scenario,
because I mean, what that husk. That one in particular would have super strength, probably, I don't know, one of the healing abilities, and then obviously his
3 abilities the thing is that they say his 3 abilities are super strength, super regeneration, and shock absorption.
Yeah.
However, they say that even though that he gets nullified by the classroom rep, which I think that they put him there because like if the party was misbehaving, they at least needed someone who goes, look, you are not going to use those powers in my classroom as I say so. And I think that's sort of where it comes from. But yeah, they say that he can't be nullified, or at least even when he's nullified, his super strength.
Well,
still
it doesn't
exists.
nullify all his powers. It nullifies like a select one or something. So
I think they actually confirmed that it would nullify all of his powers, but because his super strength is actually because his body has been augmented, it doesn't affect his super strength. Now, here's where I think this comes from. I'm going to go ahead and say that he does not have any super strength. I'm actually going to say that he has a unique attribute where instead of getting super strength, he gets the shock absorption ability. And instead of adaptive regeneration, he just gets regeneration. And then instead of mutation control, he has a few different forms of mutations that are just stuck. and then he has a load of other downsides. So it's like, you can't nullify his mutation ability where he can like create new parts of body parts, because once they've been made, they've been stuck that way because someone has programmed them to work in a specific way. So in other words, giving him a stronger body, giving him this, giving him that. So mutation control probably gave him all of those weird, like slightly more durable body, super strength, bigger body, so that he's a little bit more tankier.
The fair increase in speed as well, because
So basically, like if they're high dexterity or high speed, either that or he just basically uses like super strength to launch himself everywhere. Although they do state that he can perceive things as fast as All Might can move, so therefore his brain, or at least his instincts, are faster than the eye can see, which again would mean he's super fast. So again, mutation might have just gone into overdrive, given him a body that is fast and strong, but then because that they have mutated his body that way, it's then like whenever Aizawa nullifies him, all it's doing is stopping the power from being able to further transform his body. It can't undo the transformations onto his body. So therefore, you could say that, like, the downsides for that are the super regeneration, however, can be nullified, and it's not adaptive. It cannot adapt. And again, because he's got all those effects, you could then have it that he has shock absorption as his other ability, but he doesn't have any combat abilities. Can't breathe fire, can't turn his arms into, like, different weapons, can't shoot animite lasers, which, again, is, like, a weakness type. So, in other words, it's a unique husk, but it still works the same way. So it's like, hang on a second, why does he have so many powers? And then it's translated to hang on a second, why does he have 2 defensive abilities? He should only either be able to regenerate or take more damage. He shouldn't be able to do 2. And therefore it's like, oh yeah, he has multiple powers. And therefore that's that. So that's where I think it would start. I think it would start in that part, and then it would go on to the USJ thing, and I think that's it. The first 2 to 3 sessions, if not the first 4 sessions, would be that, and then it would end with the awesome, like, okay, and then it's NPC versus NPC as they see what how strong the strongest hero is against this monster.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a bit of downtime between these parts as well, but obviously
which is why I say maybe
the main things to happen. Yeah,
because it's still quite quick.
And I imagine there might be like a session of build up for the tournament arc, or at least most of it, and then obviously then the tournament arc is quite a few sessions of events. Well,
with the tournament, and with the sports festival, it is exactly that, and you get to see more of the NPCs that you didn't get to see beforehand.
You also get to see other classes in thing as well, because it's where you first meet Class 1B.
Oh yeah, the narrator getting to further expand it and saying, oh well, I kind of wanted this guy on the hero course, so basically we're going to have it that like this character that I kind of missed out, he's going to be there, but I'm actually going to get like a bit of drama going, where he's like, oh, I'm going to take one of your spots if you don't perform this well, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh man, what kind of power does he have? He has brainwashing. If you talk to him, he can brainwash you. What? And it's like, yeah, he's going to use taunt and charisma rolls to try and get you out of it. And if you can't roll a decent willpower, a will save, or a nerve to, keep your emotions in check, then basically you suddenly go, okay, that does it, and then suddenly you are brainwashed. And it's just kind of an interesting theme where the players all have to, go through, which again makes sense because, again, who are all the final contestants? All of the players. You've got Midoriya, you've got Katsuki Bakugo, you've got Shoto Todoroki, you've got Tenya Ida, Uchako Uraraka, Ochako Uraraka, Uravati. That's the one that I'm not going to mess up on saying. And Kirishima. And then just the narrator being a troll just adds a couple of NPCs from Class B that are just like there to annoy each and every one of the different players.
Well, again, I mean, obviously Kirishima meets his bro.
Kirishima meets Tetsu. And then you obviously have it that Katsuki also then meets Monoma, the guy who has a copying power, who's like super troll. and then you've then got obviously Midoriya, and funnily enough, again, all of them pair up because the player who plays as the players who play Bakugo and Kirishima, they team up together and just try and get a couple of the NPCs that they're trying to roughly
those
remember.
Two are more likely, like, they're probably like the best friends out of the game.
Out of the game,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got Midoriya, who's then with Ochako, and he's just like, oh, thank you for like helping. Because I genuinely thought that no one was going to help me, and like the DM was just basically going to put me with,
Midoriya is the new player sitting at the table who just tries to think of smart things to do.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've then got they're like, oh yeah, we should ask Tenya, and then not realizing that it's like, oh yeah, sorry, we were just talking about this. You know what? I think the cavalry battle, the bit between the cavalry battle, I'm gonna say there was probably like a week or a couple of days or a couple of weeks between. There was probably a pause, a gap between those two sessions. We go, here's the cavalry battle, here's how it goes. All right, see you guys next week, or see you guys next session, or whatever. And they cut it off there, and everyone now has to come up with their own teams. They finally get there, and it's like, okay, so let's enact it so that I know roughly what's going on. Anyway, so I'm now going to go speak to Ida. And Ida goes, I'm sorry, but I'm also going to be fighting against you. And then it's like, I'm teaming up with Todoroki. And it's like, what? That's why you didn't answer any of my DMs when I was asking if you were going to play with me. I'm sorry, bro, but I need to prove that I'm better than you. And then they join too. It's like, it's kind of interesting. And again, either having it that like they saw a really interesting role play aspect, even though they might be friends inside or outside, but it's that thing of, regardless of who is or who isn't friends on the table at this particular moment, the tension can be felt, or the jokes are sort of being passed around at this point, where they just go, "Oh man, that's why you didn't speak to me."
Apart from Bakugo's player, who is definitely getting angry that they're not winning.
You know what? I'd actually say either they are played by someone who is perfectly calm and is just playing as a character who is just like over the top, either because that they love acting this out, or they are actually a character that is both angry inside and outside. Sort of almost like a very passionate player who is also very passionate at being trying to reenact the role play out. Which is actually quite interesting, because you very rarely get those characters that are those people who will actually reenact their character stuff out, and although that they are feeling the rage, they're not actually taking it too seriously and not taking it too far. So again, that could be used where it's like all of the other players are like, oh man, okay, so they're acting this way. We can laugh about it because we all know that you're not being really serious. But in game, our characters are like, "Oh man, this is really sort of interesting / dark." So yeah, I think you're right there. When it comes to the PvP,
also I have to say as well, Dark Shadow. I've forgotten the person who actually has the quirk.
Tokiyami, or Fumikage Tokiyami.
He is shown off quite a bit to be quite a contender in terms of his abilities.
Yes.
Because he's probably shown at this point, especially if we're putting him as an NPC, he's probably shown to be the most powerful NPC within the classes, at least.
Yes, yeah.
Because the only reason he loses is because he goes up against Bakugo, who has a power that's literally opposite to his. It's just a bad back guy.
I think, if I were to go based on this, I think that they were either privately told the NPCs that they chose all of their abilities and weaknesses, and they only got to know their weaknesses when they were actually definitively chosen. So it's like, oh yeah, and here's my power, here's my name and my personality and my power, here's what I look like, here's my personality, here's my name, here's my power. And eventually it's like, okay, I'll choose you. I'm definitely choosing these two. What are your abilities and weaknesses? Okay, so this is your weakness, got it. Here's the limitations to your powers. And then you've got, again, the same thing with this character, that character, the other character. Because then you actually have this moment that you actually get these different layers of, characters having different abilities and capabilities and aspects, where it's like, okay, you can't have a cheap out moment where it's like someone just goes, okay, so what is your ability? And they just go, hey, it's this ability. What's your weakness? My weakness is I can't do this, and it's like, cool, yeah, I choose not to have them on my team. Then that weakness is too crap,
Yeah.
and it's like, nope, sorry,
Yeah.
you already picked them. And therefore it's like, they chose different people, and it's like, okay, so I'm gonna choose the guy with the bird head. You haven't really told me too much about his power. And then suddenly it's like, okay, so my power is dark shadow. A giant shadow can come out of me, but like
That is literally, from what I imagine, is because obviously his power is shown earlier, but it's off screen, so the characters wouldn't really see it. But in terms of on a table, but I just kind of imagine that if we're placing Deku as the new player, he just goes, that character looks interesting. I want him. And he's just choosing people based off either because they've slightly talked to him or just because they look cool.
Well,
because the other person,
I like the idea that like basically the Hatsume girl, the support class, the Hatsume basically walks up to them and is like, "Hey, I really want to help you because I'm going to give you a ton of gadgets." And it's like basically it was like the idea that the DM basically just wanted to have it. It's like, by the way, there are also some of the support course group, and
they've also already. Had they already talked by that point? I don't remember. I think
they hadn't talked to her by that point. Ochako did see her, but they didn't. Again, they didn't really have too much of an actual interaction. But I was going to say with those particular things, I think there was a pause, and they chose outside, and then they did the cavalry battles and everything, and then obviously they got the points. I'm going to say that it was more kind of like, again, I'm going to say that it was either like the NPC rolled one last time to just see if they could snag one, or it was something like, I'm gonna roll a severity roll, or I'm gonna make you roll a perception roll, and it's like, okay, I'll roll a perception roll. I didn't see anything. Hey, character with glasses, did you see something? Rolls a perception roll. No, I didn't see anything. Okay, roll severity. Okay, he takes one of your bands that gives them enough points to win, or it's just. Well, he just snagged him and nobody noticed, and that's how everyone else gets to stay in.
I imagine what he did is instead of saying it, he probably just he might have just texted it to them, like, "Oh, hey, roll perception." So he's just describing stuff, other things going on, and then there's a couple of rolls done on the side where everyone else is questioning it, and he's like, "Oh, hey, I managed to stack some of these patches." It's like, oh. Great, and then the other two are like, "Damn, and the other two are like, "Damn it, I rolled too low." Then obviously the main thing that then happens is obviously the Todoroki Max story, of the tournament arc, which the last part is kind of dedicated to him to a degree.
I think it's the fact that player already knew, because they'd be going back and forth with the narrator, and maybe even having it that at first they were like, okay, I want it that my character's the son of the number one hero. It's like, I can't really do number one. Could we do number two hero? Because they were like going to eventually have the whole reveal of, oh, that power isn't their natural power, and therefore I have to have it that like you actually have to have someone who you don't end up inheriting that power because of nepotism or any other particular bullcrap reason. And it's that thing of like, okay, number two hero, I'll give you this number two hero. What kind of powers backstory do you want? I'll have it that he has fire because I just like this, that, and the other. Okay,
that you could go down that route, or it was literally the fact of he said, hey, can I have a character who's essentially I essentially had a goal forced upon me to become essentially the number one or a great hero, and through essentially trying over and over again, this hero has gotten the perfect power, and then maybe the DM looks through his notes and he goes, have it that you are the son of the number two hero, and because the quirks, the power you want actually quite works with what he's got going on. And then, maybe he then writes in the fact that Endeavor then obviously married Ray, and then they had the children to get the perfect child of the ice and fire power so he can surpass All Might. And then it's that thing of he doesn't tell the player who's playing Todoroki that Endeavor is going to show up.
He just shows
up. Until he's walking down the corridor, and then boom, Endeavor's there, and he's like, "Oh, so this is happening." And then obviously they have that conversation, and then I imagine that moment. Yeah, and then I imagine they have that moment where when he walks out and he's against the guy with the tape arms,
he just goes for
And
like
he's
he
just
goes
like,
all
I'm
out.
not going to damage him, but I'm going to use max range, and I'm just going to completely freeze that side of the arena.
I like to imagine that he pulls off like because like say for instance all of the XP that he's been getting up until now he's just been building up XP and building up his ice powers because again he wanted it that he doesn't use that much on his fire powers and then he just suddenly goes like I have now got enough for a pure technique. Okay, what does it do? It's basically to capture multiple people at once. I just basically generate a large amount of ice. Anyone within my range gets instantly caught in the ice if they don't dodge it. And it's like, oh, okay, sure, those without any escape-based abilities are going to be definitely stuffed. And then just tries it out, and it's like, yep, you instantly capture Zero, and since he can't fight back, he just then, that's it. And then it's like, obviously there's then jokes, as like everyone just starts saying, nice try to poor Zero. Yeah, you monster.
Yeah, but it's also that thing where everyone else just realized, okay, this guy is... Because, like, no one else, apart from Bucko, has mission-based abilities, but even his aren't really anywhere on comparison to that.
Yeah.
So, it's just like
the sheer area
okay.
that he can do in the terms of capture.
Yeah, because the height and the size of it is ridiculous. So it's just like, he can generate that much ice, and seemingly there's practically no downside to it.
In the terms of the NPC battles, like Mina versus Aoyama or Dark Shadow versus Creati, it was just, pre-written narrative. I mean, obviously.
Certain characters he wanted to get through to the end.
Brainwashing thing, I'm thinking that was a bit of a narrative standpoint of like how Midoriya could get out of it, because it's like, okay, I'm going to give you all of the stuff that you need to know as to how to break out of it, but you can't break out of it unless this particular thing happens, and let's be honest, it's not going to happen. And then they just went, at that point, it's like, I'm gonna use willpower, and eventually they got a decent willpower save. It's like,
I kind of don't know about that. I don't think the player would know about how to do it. I think it would just be as the brainwashing goes on, the DM's like, the DM knows more about the power, and obviously the player does. He knows he at least knows half of the ins and outs of what the true power is. Where obviously the player knows nothing.
So it's like, it's more like a mystery, and it's like,
yeah. So because also it makes more sense for the questions that the character asks later, and it's more that thing of he goes, roll me willpower, and then he's like, okay, sure, and then he succeeds the whatever quota that the DM wanted him to succeed. And he goes, before you walk off, a massive amount of power blows out, and you've wrecked your finger, but now you have control back of your body. But just before then, you saw, as you were walking, like appearances of what looked like people, but they were more like, energy of colors. And you notice that one of them kind of looks like All Might, and you see it for a couple of seconds before, it disappears and you're back in the world. Yeah. Ooh, and that's kind of how I imagine it happens, because then he's like, what just happened? And it's more, he has no idea what's just happened. But he's like, I've got to win this. I can't think about this right now.
It's like, okay, and you can even have it where the narrator goes, by the way, as you noticed, I asked you to roll willpower. I didn't ask you to roll I didn't ask you to roll your dex nor your strength. You're not the one who moved your fingers. You're definitely the one who activated your power just now. And it's like, okay, I don't know what that is, but I don't really have time. I'm literally at the edge of this arena. Both of my fingers on my left hand have been broken. I now need to figure out how the hell I'm going to get out of this mess. And it's like, okay, I need to make sure that I don't speak to him for the rest of the fight. And it's like, he keeps using taunt. And you're like, I'm going to have to keep powering through. And then just, like, either rolling willpower or just rolling nerve. And it's just like, I have to keep making sure that I don't talk. And it's like, even if I don't, I just start having...
I imagine at first, like in the beginning of the fight, it was nerve, but then after that power, he was like, I'm gonna roll willpower instead, and he just keeps getting lucky on willpower.
You can either have it that way, or you can actually have it that Midoriya the player who plays Midoriya goes, instead of talking, can I actually have it that I roll disadvantage at whenever it's my turn to react against him? Because that would explain why he's able to like Shinso is able to spin him around and even hit his hand when it's Midoriya's turn. It's like that thing of like, you roll a disadvantage, you grab him, but you fail to push him out of the ring, and that's why it's like a couple of extra minutes, and in the final moment you then just see him like just judo throw him out of the ring, and that's his final success as he breaks past it. The Ochako versus Bakugo fight. This is kind of out of order here, but the Ochako versus the Uraraka versus Bakugo fight. I think that one is actually quite interesting because again, it's like the player actually being quite ingenious with how to play it, almost like D&D.
I imagine it was the fact that Deku's character was like, I have no idea how she's gonna win this, but okay, I thought of something that if I give her this, she might be able to win, and she rejects it, obviously. He's like,
oh, thanks, newbie, but I've got this. Yeah,
and it's like, I'm not sure how she's gonna win this, and then obviously she comes up with her own plan of how to win, and obviously it's really close to actually winning, and then it's just like, but I haven't used the AoE until now. And it just blows up all the rock stuff.
That maximum explosive ability, I assume, is either just a really good roll, or it's a pure technique that does recoil to his own hand when he does it. But obviously, because he's able to just have some time to recover in between matches, he doesn't have to worry about it.
It's just that thing of like, and I imagine that's obviously when Bakugo not only gains respect, but I imagine the player of Bakugo was like, oh, damn, you almost got me there.
It's like, that was going to be a lot easier. I start running towards her, and this time I actually call her by her name, because I don't know if you realize this. He only actually calls people by their real name when he sees them or deems them as a worthy person, a worthy opponent, or a friend. And he doesn't really call Kirishima by anything other than spiky hair, or dumb hair, or something like that. And then like during the sports festival, he calls Kirishima either dumb hair or spiky hair. And then during the exact same arc, he then says, like, because after that he goes, look, you need a front rider, right? Someone who can withstand your blasts because your power is so like damaging. Well, I'll be the perfect front rider. I can take anything you've got, throw it at me, and I'm ready. And he goes, okay, my character now has a deep respect for your character. And then, like, during that thing, it's like, Kirishima. And that's the moment where it's like, oh, he said my character's name. And that's exactly like the thing that he's been trying to do. He's just been trying to have it where it's like, my character only calls people by nicknames, not by their real names. And that's why he only ever calls them, you know that. And I think it's kind of funny because I think the only time that he actually calls him Todoroki is when he's seeing him as a rival. But when he then starts realizing that he's not gaining the respect as a rival, he then goes back to calling him Icy Hot Bastard. Which again, fair enough. And he obviously calls Thingy Pink Cheeks. And then right there, he's like, okay, I'm not going to call her Pink Cheeks anymore. She has earned my respect. As I start running towards her, Uraraka, and it's like, okay, I haven't actually told you this, but you now need to roll for me. You now need to roll a con roll. Why? I haven't told you this, but you actually don't have 1 HP. You actually have 0. I've just been letting you run on empty to see if your plan would have made it a draw. Oh, okay.
I mean, it's that all because of all the physical actions. It's like, because she had to touch a lot of her powers and activate a lot of her abilities, like rapid succession. So maybe it's just that thing of like, oh, roll me an endurance quickly. It's like, okay, oh, no, I got below 10. It's like, as you run towards her, she falls on the floor.
Yeah.
And you realise that she's out of energy, and it's just like, oh.
It was more for the factor of a cinematic ending. It didn't work out, and then it's that thing of like, okay, so you both continue. No, you've run out of everything that you could do. You could either have it that, or it's actually because of the way that her gravity power works, it makes her feel sick. You could actually have it that instead of making you feel sick, it's actually tiring you out. You took the brunt of a lot of those explosions, and I'm now going to ask you to roll me this particular roll. And it's like maybe a natural 1, and instead of like vomiting, instead of like fatigue, you just collapse as your body just will not continue as you are too tired. Because you could either have it that like, oh, it's because of that, or you could actually have it that like, the first hit that Bakugo goes for is like, oh, I'm going to sort of hold back, kind of, and I'm just going to try and use, like, knockout. So I'm going to use, like, explosion, but to hopefully cause, like, because it's a physical damage attack, I'm going to hopefully try and knock you out. And it's like, you sort of succeed, but, you know, you have fatigue, but because you're using mostly your powers, you don't have to worry too much. But now they're using all these different strategies to try and get around it. Obviously Todoroki versus Izuku, breaking fingers, using taunt, maybe a bunch of other charisma stuff, trying to basically charisma, and then eventually it's like,
well, yeah, because obviously
no,
before that he finds out about his backstory.
Yeah, they have a character moment where the two of them talk to each other, and he reveals
obviously
the backstory.
eavesdrops on it.
Yes, yeah, because he wanted to actually know what's going on with Midoriya, but he also
then
wanted to do it
off game. I imagine maybe the DM and Izuku's player talking. He's like, I'm going to try and save him in our battle. And as he's doing that, he's making a bunch of charisma rolls against Todoroki. And then obviously near the end, he finally succeeds, and Todoroki's able to use both of his powers.
Come at me with all you got. It's your quirk, not his. And then
he uses his technique where he heats up his arm, and then he dramatically freezes it to then create the giant explosion,
giant shockwave.
Which immediately just wins him the fight.
I'd say that the way that could have worked is either because it's an ability that he'd been saying that he wanted to do for a while, but the DM said not until you get balance.
Yeah.
But then in this moment, it's like you get a natural 20, or even like, oh yeah, he gets a natural 20, so it makes you want to use your power, and then you get a natural 20 on activating your fire. So I'll let you use it, and you can. So in other words, like, we've got it already set up for when you will be able to use it, but then for some reason they were like lenient on this sudden moment of like, I'll let you do it now, but you will not be able to use it again until you quote unquote overcome your emotional trauma or overcome your issues with your power, aka get balance. And therefore, like, that's when they were like, okay, yeah.
Well,
sure.
I think that'd be separate from the emotional issues, because obviously he goes to use it again, his fire, but then I imagine the DM during the Bakugo versus Todoroki fight, I imagine he goes, as you go to use your fire, roll willpower, and he fails the will roll, and then he essentially just stops.
It's funny the way that you think that, because I actually think the opposite. I actually think that they go to use it, and then they choose themselves to roll willpower, and they fail.
Yeah, it's one of the two. It's either the player chooses
thing.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the two, but I mean I still think it can be roleplay even if the DM is the one that asks you to roll it.
Oh yeah, no. I just think that, like, in this particular scenario, I think it is more they take it into their own hands in this moment.
Yeah, I mean it really depends, because I know in Critical Role in the second season, one of the characters, every time that he sees fire, he has to make a I think it's like a wisdom check, and if he fails, he essentially stops all things and just starts staring at the fire and can't do anything.
Kind of like a moth.
Yeah. Because that has something to do with his backstory and what happened. So,
I would also say the fight between those two is actually quite interesting, quite epic. But it is obviously that character just being like, my character wants you to use all of your power, fire and ice. Stop holding back on me. And then it comes to the end. It's like, no, you held back on me. All right, that's it, mother effer. I'm coming over there, and I'm gonna beat you up. And it's like, oh, suddenly one of the NPCs puts you to sleep. Wait, what? And it's that moment of my character just goes banana ham nut butters, and it's like, why? Because my character is furious. I wanted that fight fair and square.
It's more the fact, because during up this point, his characters had an issue with Deku, because he went from having no power to suddenly having a stupidly strong quirk.
Yeah. And
for his character, it's more insulting that the person he considers lesser than him managed to get the ice and fire to both come out, and in his fight he couldn't, and he only won because that he didn't use his firepower. And it's just that thing of like, I don't deserve this win, like, and that pisses me off even more, because now my win's empty, because I didn't win when you used
at the same level as what Deku was. Yeah,
So it's like that thing of like this win is empty because I didn't get what Deku managed to draw out of you and actually fight you 100%.
It's not even that as well. It's also the fact that like if you ever look at it, he's being seen by so many people. This is more the character rather than the player, but the character.
Well, I don't know. Bakugo never really cared, especially Bakugo. He doesn't really care about anyone else. I think it was more personally just the fact that.
Well, it's because that he doesn't want an easy win, but even more so, he doesn't. He knows that he's obviously he knows that he's not going to get any stronger if everyone keeps holding back on him. B, it's because that Deku got it out of him, not him. And C, it's because that everyone is seeing him say, I just want everyone to know I'm going to win. It's kind of a false win if your opponent basically holds back when he shows everyone else in the arena that he was not holding back against the other player. So it's kind of like a combination of all three. And then obviously having it where it's like, okay, so now I'm going to have this, and I guess we'll end it here, but I'll just say it's the moment where the character then gets a call and says, okay, so here's the next plot point, and basically says, your brother has been hurt. He's been really badly injured during hero work. You have to come to the hospital immediately. And that's sort of roughly where that ends off. We went over by about 15 minutes because obviously we were hoping to do an hour. This actually has a lot more in it than I thought. So yeah, I guess the last thing I will say, which I just said, so the narrator probably has plot lines ready and different characters, and they're like, how can I connect them to characters' backstories? / how can I connect them to what is going on with the characters? And because of this is then, okay, it's now going to be the Ida stuff, because he didn't really get to do much in the first few sessions. I'm now going to allow him to do much more as time goes on. Especially with this new arc that's going to be mostly about these main three, and then Bakugo, Kirishima.
I imagine that's more because the other players couldn't make it for a while.
Yeah, they either couldn't make it, or it was like maybe a couple of sessions where heck, it could either be the Hero Killer Stain thing is actually just one session, because you could actually have it that everyone got to do more sort of minor character stuff for the first bit. Like, okay, so we're going to go to everyone's hero agencies. Kirishima, you're with Fourth Kind. Tenya Ida, you're with this guy who's in the same city as Hosu City, the same city as where Stain is. Oh, Ochako, you're with Gunhead. Oh, Todoroki, you're with Endeavor. And
I was just going to say, because you can say like the training with Deku's training with Gran Torino is more of like an off-screen thing that is just more explained what happened.
I was actually going to say that could actually be more of them being able to show off small aspects of what they're learning. Because, for instance, instead of downtime when I go, hey, all the characters get to mess about together, it's, hey, all the characters get to mess about separately in their own things. Where the DM, make all of these new characters for you guys to sort of be in their agencies, and oh look, some of you are with other NPCs, and when I mean some of you, I think I mean one, because I think Kirishima is the only one with Class B, because he's actually with Tetsu. So yeah, either way, that sets up for the next one, which again we'll talk about in another time of the episodes of If Blank were a tabletop RPG. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. We have kind of been trying to do this for a while. As we said, it won't be scheduled, so it will just come out as and when, purely because we have to feel not only in the mood, but we also have to do a bit of research just beforehand. I have been recently watching My Hero Academia. I'm now on the start of season 5 again. Well, if you guys enjoyed that, if anyone out there who listened to this enjoys listening to these, please let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe at the AnimiteTales. And of course, if you like anything to do with tabletop RPGs, definitely stick around for some of the other podcasts that we do, such as the Power Podcast, where we talk about all sorts of different forms of fiction, such as superpowers, magic, even weird tropes that are used in fiction or writing. And of course, we also have the Dev Plays, which are the streams where we play the AnimiteTales as we develop and playtest them as we play campaigns that are not official campaigns that will actually be modules, because we don't want to spoil stuff for you guys when they come out. So if you like any of that, if any of that is sort of your groove, definitely check us out. Like, subscribe, and of course comment below what exactly you'd like us to talk about next time. And if we can get round to it, we'll obviously try it. But I think next time will be part 2 of My Hero Academia.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah.
Yeah, more than likely. But yeah, okay. Any last things that you want to say, Kane?
No, not really. I think we said it much. Well, most of it pretty much. So
yeah, fair enough. Well, in that case, guys, take care and have a wonderful night. Bye.
bye.